to see what they're doing.
Somebody gonna bring that up. Somebody gonna mention that tonight.
It needs to be in vocational training.
To call to order the March 6, 2019 Frederick County Planning Commission meeting. You join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. The first item on the agenda tonight is the adoption of the agenda. If I have a motion to do so.
So moved.
Second. Got a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. There's no change to the minutes as they were sent to us. I'll accept a motion to accept the minutes of the January 16, 2019 meeting. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item on our agenda tonight is our committee reports. The first one I have is, I'm sorry I didn't get to you, Mr. Moan, do we have one for CPPC?
We do, Mr. Chairman. CPPC met in February, and we discussed two items on our agenda, which actually are the two items that are on tonight's agenda for discussion, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but just to give a quick overview, the first item was CPPA 0218 for Brucetown Road Area Amendment, and the committee did consider some changes that have been made to some of the mapping that staff had prepared, and had some good discussion with the applicant and their representatives, and ultimately felt comfortable with that comp plan amendment moving forward based on some of the revisions. I know Candace has identified some things that they're looking for the full commission's input on tonight, if possible, as this goes forward to the board. The second item was CPPA 0119, which is the Blackburn Property Workforce Housing Urban Development Area Expansion and Land Use Designation proposal. And that proposal did not receive support from the committee to move forward in general, I think as captured in the materials, over concern about changing or converting industrially designated land to residential land use. But with that said, that was the committee's business.
All right, thanks, sir. Next one I have is Frederick Water. Rhodes?
Yes, Kevin, we met February the 19th, and I've got two mixed reports here, but I'm going to do the one that was sent to me. The Peckin Water Supply Plan has finally received all the approvals they need to draw water, 8 million gallon of water a day from the Peckin Creek. So we've finally gotten all of our permits for that. Frederick Water staff and the engineers that are working with Frederick Water are also working on the final construction of the withdrawal raw water pump stations, and also water and sewer lines that will be installed for the construction of the plant, and slated to be bid in June. So that's also rolling along very well. So we should hopefully be starting on that project very soon too. Another big project Frederick Water's got is Route 37 water line. That water line they're going to run down 37. It's 3.5 miles of 20-inch water main. And we had seven sealed bids from that. And they ranged anywhere from $3.9 million to $7 million. And Ganner was the lowest bid at $3.9 million, and we've gotten a report from, I guess, Loudon Water that Ganner did 5 miles of water line for them, and they were very much appraised for doing the work, so it sounds like they're going to be a pretty good outfit. And the last thing that we talked about is the elevated water tank over on 277. And that went out to bid with 5 sealed bids. We got bids ranging from $1.7 million to $2.3 million. And so we're going to go with the lowest bid on that with $1.7 million. And that tank is going to be very, very similar to the one that we have at the office right now. So it won't be a surprise to anybody when they see it. It'll be just pretty much what we got now. And it's also a 500,000 gallon tank. And The last thing we had was the rainfall. I think Mark was really interested in this. We got January, we had 3.1 inches, which is still a good average. December was 3.95, which is a little above normal. The quarries, I'm going to say this because it's getting kind of wild now. They're still rising, and they're full of water.
We've had a lot of it, so.
And that's it.
And I'd like to correct myself. It's Mr. Unger, not Mr. Oates. I wrote the wrong name on here, so I'm sorry for misspeaking. Our next report is Winchester Planning Liaison, Ms. Eaton.
So our March 5th work session yesterday, we reviewed our new business item in preparation for the upcoming public hearing meeting to be held March 19th, specifically right-of-way 19091, an ordinance to vacate and convey an 883-foot-long portion of Summit Avenue running north and south. It's parallel to Parkway Street, which is just a few blocks up, and to the south of 301 Cork Street. Some of Summit Avenue right-of-way is currently being used by the city as part of the maintenance facility, most of you know, right over, not too far. This right-of-way vacation and conveyance is the final step in consolidating the land for the new facility. And then lastly, the Planning Commission is in the midst of assisting our CFO, Mary Blow, in the development of a survey for, a community survey for the, for a comprehensive plan survey.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
That concludes my report.
thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to have you tonight. And our last report, she
Just made it.
She just made it. Our Board of Supervisor, Ms. Trout.
Thank you. So the Board of Supervisors met on Wednesday, February 13th. For Planning Commission business, we approved Renaissance Drive Phase 2, which is a design for the cost estimate for the completion of the project. And the committee recommended proceeding with that as the at-grade crossing as an alternative option, and we went ahead and approved that. We had a request by Mountain Falls Park residents for a designation of a sanitary district, and we denied that with the stipulations that we hope the residents would come forward with 50% of of the people living in that area wanting to move forward with that sanitary district. So that could be reopened if they came before us again. And then we rezoned 04-18 Tasker Road and Warrior Drive commercial property from a general business districts with proffers to B2 general district business, excuse me, gentlemen, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, general business district with proffers. And then we had a discussion on our 2019 to 2024 capital improvement plan and moved that forward for a public hearing. And then we also met on Wednesday, February 27th, and had no planning commission business, which never occurs. That concludes my report.
Thank you, appreciate it. Before we move off of committees, I do want to make a brief announcement to our commissioners that you've got updated paperwork tonight. We sit down, and I've contacted some of you that we made changes on some of the committees. I'll make some brief announcement. Mr. Klein has been added to the DRC committee, and also on top of his duties as conservation for his historical resources. Mr. Triplett's been added to CPPC. Greg Poole is a citizen. He's going on the CPPC committee. Ms. Dawson will move over from CPPC to DRRC. John Light is coming back on board with us on the CPPC as a citizen, and Mr. Morrison goes to the RRC, but that should be all updated in the new handout we got tonight. So just kind of rearranging committees, and we should be full and balanced with all of our committees at this time. That being said, with the housekeeping, the next item on our agenda is citizen comments. And this is the time that anyone in the audience would like to come before us. Tonight, we do not have public hearings, so if you would like to speak to the items that's on the agenda tonight, this is your time to come before us and speak. So anyone in the audience that would like to speak to us now?
I'd like to speak.
Please state your name and magisterial
My name
district.
is Arthur Bragg. I'm from the Stonewall District.
If I could just ask you to pull that microphone down just a little bit.
My name is Arthur Bragg. I'm from the Stonewall District, Brucetown, Clearbrook area. And I have some neighbors with me tonight here to oppose the extension of industrial land use and the water and sewer service east of the Carmuth facility. I have a petition of over 50 residents in the area. Everyone was happy to sign it. I could have gotten more. All of them taxpayers opposing the proposal so close to our community. For years, the quarry has been the limit of industrial-type uses and traffic in Clearbrook. There are many pieces of land west of the quarry along Route 11 and Interstate 81 corridor that is either zoned or planned to be industrial uses. Brucetown Road is in bad shape due to the quarry. The traffic light at Route 11 backs up because of trucks can barely get through. Sometimes it's backed up as far as the fire hall. I'm against adding any more truck traffic. There is no need to change the land use in this area, especially since there are 128 acres of vacant land for sale next to this farm. For sale and is already zoned EM. The only reason to amend the plan is so some company can buy cheaper land at the expense of the Brucetown community. Today, the governor released a report, which perhaps you all have seen, of the facility that's coming. So I called to find out where it was going to be, and it's going to be adjacent to the quarry, and it is called Clorox, a cat litter plant. And they indicate 100 employees. That's 100 cars in a day, 100 cars out a day. And so if we were to, and there's no mention in the write-up about any limit on expansion. It indicates that there is expansion. The company can expand. The facility, if they have 5 trucks in a day, 5 trucks an hour and 5 out, that's 10 trucks. Multiply that by a 24-hour operation, you've got 240 trucks more on the Brucetown Road. That's 7,200 trucks a month, 86,400 a year. It's just ridiculous. And VDOT ignores the road conditions, absolutely ignores. I call Richmond and complain, they send a rep down, and they talk to me and nothing happens. So the best scenario, if this were to happen, is that the quarry should have a road directly from their land to Route 11. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Who would like the petition?
You give it to me, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? Name and magisterial district, and we would, 3 minutes is usually our time. So
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Holland with the Shawnee District. I come to you wearing a few hats tonight in support of the proposed workforce housing development on Apple Valley Road. I'm a Frederick County resident, a homeowner in the Shawnee District. I also serve as Director of Community Engagement at United Way, where I lead the Valley Assistance Network, a program to connect families with community resources. I'm also a member of the steering committee for the Northern Shenandoah Valley Housing Coalition. Through both personal experiences and working with clients each day, I can tell you our community is facing an affordable housing crisis. In 2018, my program served 600 families and made 2,000 referrals. Nearly 70% of all those referrals were related to housing insecurity. Every day, working families contact me needing help to find a safe, affordable place to live. The number of decent, affordable apartments and townhomes continues to decrease in our community as property management companies and landlords sell to investors and out-of-town companies. Meanwhile, all the new luxury developments are nice, yes, but well above fair market rent and what our families can afford. The proposed housing project you're voting on would bring over 200 rental units to the area and support working middle-class families like police officers, nurses, and teachers. In Frederick County, 6% of the population lives in poverty, but another 25% are considered ALIS. Hopefully you've heard that term by now. It's asset limited, income constrained, and employed. ALIS is employed in critical jobs in our community like manufacturing, healthcare, and food service. Even while working, they struggle each month to make ends meet. Workforce housing is a relatively new term in our community. It's not the same as affordable housing. The Housing Coalition defines workforce housing as housing that is affordable for people making 60 to 120% of the median income. For a family of four, that means an income ranging from $43,000 to $85,000 a year. To put that into perspective, myself, working at a nonprofit, and my husband, a teacher for Frederick County Public Schools, need workforce housing. Nearly half of all renters in Frederick County are cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their monthly income on housing. That causes a ripple effect, making it difficult for families to afford other necessities. My husband and I relocated from North Carolina to my hometown of Winchester 3 years ago for work, and because we knew it's where we wanted to raise our 3-year-old son. We were on the verge of moving to Inwood, West Virginia, because we couldn't afford to live in Winchester. We were fortunate to be able to purchase a home, but had we rented, we would have had to pay fair market rent for a 4-bedroom home, which is a whopping $1,700 a month in Frederick County. The developers estimate an average rent in this neighborhood to be $1,000, making it much more affordable for families like mine. I urge you to consider this rezoning request to support the workforce housing development and Alice families. The well-being of our community and future generations depend on it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am?
Hello.
State your name, Edgedale District.
My name is Brenda Fristow, and I'm with Stonewall District. So Chairman and members, thank you so much for serving. I am here as well to ask you to vote against this proceeding for the Clorox plant to go into Brucetown. And I wanted to refer to the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, which is a guide to be used. And respectfully, I'd like to read to you, I know you already know this, the vision statement for Frederick County, Virginia, which adopted by the Board of Supervisors and is an umbrella for all of the different commissions. It is, the vision statement is to ensure the quality of life of all Frederick County citizens by preserving the past and planning for the future through sound fiscal management. And I would assume that that fiscal management would include the use of land and using the documents that you have in place. Right now, that land, as we know, is beautiful farmland across from residential homes. We already deal with the blasting, the dust. We have an elementary school there. We have another elementary school going in at Snowden Bridge. So there's all that we're dealing with, not to mention the traffic, 24/7, trucks coming, going. You know, the economy's good right now. They're working almost 24 hours a day. But I would also like to read to you respectfully the core values, 3 of the core values that the Board of Supervisors also implemented. That it is a government concerned with long-range planning that protects our rural heritage and directs its future growth through planned infrastructure. A government concerned with expanding commercial and industrial tax base in order to ensure a viable and thriving economy. And I would have you research that tax base, because this is a manufacturing plant which does not bring in the same tax base as possibly the real estate. So that's something that you may want to look at. They're not taxed in the same method for their personal property. The third thing is a government that emphasizes a government that looks to the future and implements plans to ensure that the quality of life for future generations is preserved. And we've got a park there. We have an elementary school, a second elementary school going in. So I would say back in the day, Carmus, which wasn't Carmus at the time, when they started this quarry, the Frederick County already gave away all of their rights to oversee anything having to do with them, because I'm dealing with the Virginia Board of Mining right now, who oversees that, and we have a mountain that has been built within the last year. It's a mountain. Pretty soon you're going to have a little light up there for the airplanes so that they're not going to run into it. So we're dealing with that. It's right beside of a park, a beautiful park.
Ma'am, you're going to have to start wrapping up here.
Okay, so I would just say that our property values are going to go down, but more importantly than that, let's stick with I know they took a long time to do their vision and core values. So let's stick with that and let them go into the industrial areas that you already have planned for industrial. So I would ask you, please respectfully, to vote no and not let this go forward. And it appears the state of Virginia has already determined that you are going to let it go forward, which I'm sure you have not decided yet. So let's just stand up for what we believe in. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak to the Planning Commission in support of
State your name and message.
Bob Bolter. I can tell you that in a moment, but
Okay.
in support of Comprehensive Plan Amendment 0119 for Blackburn property, the proposed Shady Elm workforce housing area. And my name is Bob Bolter. I'm a resident of Frederick County and serve as president of FaithWorks Incorporated, a nonprofit community housing development organization certified by the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission. One of FaithWorks' activities since 2012 has been to provide tenant-based rental assistance, usually in the form of security deposits for many dozens of working families displaced from their rental housing. Displacement for several years was usually due to financial emergencies like illness or job loss. However, it is now frequently caused by the sale of houses or apartments to absentee landlords, followed by dramatic rent increases. In addition to helping many families move back into affordable homes, FaithWorks has experience in the Northern Shenandoah Valley with workforce housing similar to that which Equity Plus is proposing for this site. We planned and provided resident services, channeled financial resources alongside low-income housing tax credits, and served as nonprofit co-general partner for an attractive apartment community named Crystal Chase in Shenandoah County. FaithWorks would be pleased to assist Equity Plus in a similar fashion if this project is approved. In addition, I'm personally aware of the successful work of Equity Plus to preserve quality rental housing for a nationally known nonprofit in Washington, D.C. FaithWorks recently completed a Virginia Housing Development Authority-funded grant that included a review of prospective sites for affordable housing. We showed the proposed Shady Elm Apple Valley site to VHDA housing officers in December, who were impressed with its potential. We recognize that workforce housing, when strategically located near employment and shopping centers, can be a win-win for its residents, the neighboring community, and local employers. My understanding is that this site would be particularly well-suited for this residential use because the proposed single-family homes can be arranged in an attractive setting compatible with wet areas of the property that might not be as compatible for industrial development. Also, the project's current land price is crucial in order to make housing in Frederick County affordable for workforce families in the surrounding employment area. There's a growing awareness that attractive and livable housing is needed across the entire income range for working families. I am confident that the future residents of this proposed Shady Elm workforce housing area will be welcomed by their local business, church, and Frederick County resident neighbors. I sincerely believe that this site is uniquely suited for the proposed workforce housing that will serve the local community. I respectfully ask that you favorably consider this request for the comprehensive plan amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else? State your name, Mansfield District, in 3 minutes.
Got it. James King, Stonewall District. I'm owner of RE/MAX Roots here in Winchester, also an agent for RE/MAX. I'm to support the workforce management or workforce housing that is proposed. Something that we deal with every day as agents is to find homes for clients. something that I deal with and my office deals with weekly is trying to find something that somebody can afford and to, in a decent area without having to drive 2 and 3 hours, moving as what one lady already stated about going into West Virginia and working in Winchester. With that being said, just recently I helped 3 nurses who had to join together to actually rent a house in town just so they could be close to work versus trying to do it individually. If you ever get a chance to search and try to find a house for $900 to $1,000 in Winchester City, Frederick County, you're going to find a 1, maybe 2-bedroom house. Just for example, in Snowden Bridge community, our townhouses that are 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, rent anywhere from $1,600 to $1,800 a month. And that's for just a townhouse. Our single-family homes in Snowden Bridge rent for $2,500 a month. So again, that's something I think is greatly needed, and I would support anything that we could do as a community to help our workforce, especially the nurses, first responders, and things of that nature. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks,
Ladies.
sir. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Avram Fector. I'm a resident of Loudoun County, but I'm the developer of the Workforce Housing Project, and reading just 2 letters from folks who do live here who could not make it tonight, so I'm reading into the record. The first is actually from Fellowship Bible Church, their board and their elders and their pastor. The church is directly across the street from our proposed project. I think you've got copies of the letter in your packet, but just to highlight, they testify to the need of the workforce housing for their own parishioners, and they acknowledge the current industrial zoning of the facility, but close by saying, while the community very much desires the jobs that come with industrial development, we also desperately need the housing to support those jobs. For this reason, we urge the Planning Commission to support this amendment. So our direct neighbors support this application.
I choked them all.
And we also have a letter that should be in your package from the Blue Ridge Habitat for Humanity, also speaking to the need of the housing and supporting the comp plan amendment. I would just like to stress, as a developer that works on workforce housing projects across the country, because we're trying to keep the homes affordable, we have to keep our rents to a certain level to hit the incomes we're trying to serve. So we have a very constrained budget for the amount of money we can spend on the project to deliver a quality home while still charging the low rent. There are very, 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 very few sites that meet all the criteria to do that. Evan will talk about that in more detail later, but I do want to emphasize, we don't want to go through a zoning process. It's a pain. It takes time. There's risk. If we could have found something that didn't require a zoning process, we would have done it. We're here because we can't. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom Heineman. I'm one of Avi's partners on the project. I'm not a resident. I actually live in Washington, D.C. My background is very much in the policy space on affordable housing issues. Worked for HUD for a long time, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with him to hopefully bring workforce housing to Frederick County. What I wanted to do, and I believe you have the letters in your packets, is to highlight a couple of letters that you have. One from the Top of Virginia Regional Chamber of Commerce, and there's a couple of sentences that really stood out. With more and more companies coming into the region and the growing need for workers at all skill levels, this project can provide the affordable housing needed for the younger families that will make a positive impact on the growth of this community of the northern Shenandoah Valley. Many of our young people are in vocations, in education, the local government, and other professions that have average salaries in the low 40s and not able to raise a family at a reasonable housing cost. And as a result of those two things, they say, as such, we support the necessary changes to the comprehensive planning of the Kernstown area plan. The other one I wanted to highlight is the Valley Health, and they're one of the largest. They've got about 3,000 employees here in Frederick County, in our Winchester Medical Center campus. Of their 3,000 employees, 36% earn less than $45,000 a year annual base salary. It is our understanding that The affordable, this is their quote, is, "It is our understanding that the availability of affordable housing for this population is limited." And they conclude, Valley Health supports promoting the availability of a diverse housing stock to meet the needs of residents and our employees who are in this income group. Given our current challenge of securing staff and entry-level types of roles and our expectation that this need will increase in the future, we offer our support and encouragement for the Frederick County Department of Planning Development to entertain proposals which are designed to meet this need. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else? Either item? Seeing no one, I'll close the citizen comment portion. Thank you all for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to recuse myself from the first item.
Thank you, Mr. Oates. First item on our agenda. Our next item on the agenda is the information discussion item. Item number CPPA number 02-18, Brucetown Road Area Amendment, Sewer and Water Service Area, SWAZA expansion and land use designation. This is a request for sewer and water service area expansion and land use designation associated with the comprehensive plan amendment number 02-18 for the Carter Tract. This amendment proposed to add 109 acres into the sewer water service area and remove 109 acres from the SWAZA. This amendment also seeks to designate 109 acres for industrial land uses. This property is identified with property identification number 34-A-24D in the Stonewall Magisterial District, and we have Ms. Perkins presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As you stated, this is a comprehensive plan amendment for 109 acres for a sewer water service area expansion and industrial land use designation. You may recall this was discussed by the Planning Commission back at your December 5th meeting. At that meeting, the commission did send it back to the Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee for additional review for items such as transportation and the proposed limits of the expansion. Just for a little reference of where we are, on the screen to your left is the current zoning map for the area. You have Brucetown Road in this area, and then this is the existing limits of the sewer water service area. The subject property is this site right here outlined in blue. So this was sent back to the Comprehensive Plans Committee. They discussed this at their February meeting. The CPPC discussed the transportation components of the amendment, as well as the environmental constraints and components, as well as the limits of the sewer water service area. So the CPPC did discuss revised text, and they did endorse text that expanded the transportation expectations for the site, expanded the environmental and buffering text, and it did recommend an expanded area, or an expansion area that only totaled 109 acres, which keeps the sewer water service area boundary south of Slate Run. Now, on the screen to your left is the proposed comprehensive plan amendment. For reference, again, you have Brucetown Road, the existing sewer water service area, and then right here, for reference, is Slate Run. So this proposed amendment for 109 acres keeps that industrial land use designation south of Slate Run, so you would still have rural land between Slate Run and Brucetown Road, and it also shows an expanded buffering area to the east along the Brucetown Rural Community Center. So the overall text that is before you tonight that the Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee endorsed, it shows an industrial land use designation for the site, recognition of the road network and improvements that may be identified during a rezoning, relocation of Brucetown Road from its current location, as well as improvements to Brucetown Road, improvements to Martinsburg Pike and Hopewell Road, and no access to Brucetown Road. That access would only be from the existing quarry. It also recognizes that there are water and sewer constraints in the area. It encourages protection of the environmental features, including enhanced riparian buffers, protection of drainage areas and air quality, enhanced buffering between industrial uses in the rural community center, which would encourage the use of landscaping and additional distance buffers, and it also encourages the use of rail. Now, on a side note, during the CPPC discussion, they did discuss the language of the text in regards to the use of the word should versus shall. Now, the comprehensive plan typically utilizes should in the document because it is a guiding document. The current, the text that went before the CPPC did have shall. So the CPPC supported the use of should and sent that forward to the commission for review. So we are seeking input from the Planning Commission on the terminology of should versus shall within the comprehensive plan amendment before you tonight. And with that, I would be glad to answer any questions, and we're seeking comments from the commission to forward to the board. And Mr. Tim Stowe is here on behalf of the application.
And will he be allowed to, if we have questions? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Perkins? Anyone? Mr. Stowe?
I'm going to introduce Mr. Michael Holly, who's going to speak to the project.
Thank you, guys. I'm Michael Holly. I'm Vice President of the Clorox Company. I've got my colleagues with me, Rob Burnett, who's our Strategic Project Manager, and James Holly, who would be the site leader for this project if you choose to move forward. Hopefully, we can answer any questions that you have, but we are here to discuss building a new state-of-the-art cat litter manufacturing plant here in Frederick County, bringing 100 jobs to the community. We're very excited to bring a mix of frontline associates, managers, and engineering roles to the site. And if you don't know the Clorox Company, this is building on a strong foundation of success here in Virginia as well as in the United States. The Clorox Company has been operating successfully for 105 years. We have a variety of different well-known consumer products. Of course, our namesake Clorox Bleach was how we launched the company 105 years ago. We've built on that with all kinds of products from Kingsford charcoal to Glad trash bags that you may use in your home. And of course, we actually have a large Glad plant a couple hours south of here, so we have a strong track record here in the state of Virginia. That plant employs about 350 employees. And we're very excited about our track record because one of our core values is do the right thing. And that pervades everything that we do as a company, from our manufacturing sites to how we market, and in fact, our mission statement to make everyday lives better every day. We're very proud. James Holly currently works down at our Amherst plant. He'll be transitioning to this site, and the Amherst Glad manufacturing plant is one of 10 sites that Clorox has that is now zero waste to landfill. Here in 2019, we were listed and recognized, and we were given an award by Barron's as one of 100 of the top most sustainable companies in the United States. And we also think we're a really good employer. We've been recognized by Glassdoor here in 2019 as one of their best employers as well. I do have a fact sheet. I'm not sure if you guys distribute that, but we'd love to get to know you, and just want to make sure that you, and as you move forward in considering this project, know that we will partner with you. We want to get to know you better and continue to move forward. So thank you, and if you have any questions for us or our project managers or others.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I missed your name. You said it's
Michael Holly.
Mr. Holly?
Yes, sir.
This isn't your first business venture in the state of Virginia, and you've certainly been around and done a lot of development before. You're obviously aware that if VDOT recommends or requires certain transportation improvements, that your development would have to incur the cost of those improvements and make those improvements.
Is that a question? Just make sure. Yeah. So first of all, I want to make sure you know we don't open plants very often. Frankly, this is our first project in a long time, and we're working through a lot of the process to try to get to know you and understand the processes to make sure any issues are dealt with appropriately. And you do have our commitment. We know there's concerns in the area about some of the traffic. We've heard some of those concerns, and you have our commitment to partner with the community. In fact, we've helped with several folks who are here tonight to also begin conversations with the state of Virginia to help in any funding. We will certainly be a part of that, along with any other resources that we can bring to address any concerns. Our interest, I started in manufacturing in the Clorox Company about 19 years ago, and our interest is a long-term presence that enhances the community and doesn't detract, so anything that we do is going to be sustainable, and you have our commitment to partner with you to make it successful.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Holly? Yes, Mr. Unger.
Just a couple. Do you have, in the case this would go down and get to be put in there, how much water do you plan on using a day, or does that So this is and I'll need some of my technical folks here. This is a cat litter manufacturing plant, and so there's not a lot of water that's used in the manufacturing process. Certainly, the employees and associates that are in the building will be using water, but beyond that, I don't know if you have details on that, Tim. Go ahead, thank you.
We do. We've met with Frederick Water several times and gone over the water usage. It's fairly small. And that's why the wastewater is limited to 5,000 gallons per day. The production water will be higher than that, but not a whole lot higher. But the wastewater limitation give you some sense of what we're planning on using domestically.
And then a backup question, maybe Tim will answer that one. I think you said there's virtually no waste that would go to the landfill. Is that what I heard you say? No, so we've said that we have 10 of our 28 manufacturing sites in the United States that have just gone zero waste to landfill over the past few years. Improving our sustainability is certainly a commitment we have. I don't think we can make that commitment today that this will be a zero waste to landfill right out of the gate, but we will certainly look at everything we can do. It's part of what we do. It's how we operate. At this point, I don't know the specifics and don't know if we can make that commitment at this point.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Thomas.
I'll ask the obvious question, and the question that people are concerned about, I guess, the most. We have the use of the word shall and should in the text. And shall is an absolute, should is, you may do it. I'm sure, you're aware of that, and I know Mr. Stoll's aware of that. So in a comprehensive plan, which is a planning document, I'm not sure personally, and I could get, I guess, legal interpretation of, does it really make any difference which word we use, shall or should? You've already stated that, Clorox plans on being a good neighbor and a good employer here in the county of Frederick. Do you have a problem with either word, should or shall, as far as transportation improvements? Because, again, when you come back to VDOT, VDOT's not going to give you a permit if you don't do what they want you to, what they consider required.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the real shall when you come down to the final permitting and occupying the facility. But does Clorox have a concern with the use of the word shall or should in the text, in the comprehensive plan for providing transportation improvements that meet VDOT standards?
To be honest, we really haven't had a conversation about the specific word. What I would tell you, and as you guys think about this, we want to help bring all the resources to bear to address the issues, right? And so that could be something that's done instantly. It could be done over time. It could be done as manufacturing operations grow, whatever those needs are. And I think absolutes in general are tough and make us less able to bring resources to bear. We haven't talked specifically about a word. That word came up here tonight, and but that would be my only counsel. I know through the process we've had a lot of partnership from the state of Virginia already. We've had a lot of counsel from, we've met with some of the county folks as well as some of our engineering staff are thinking through a lot of solutions to any issues that we may have to try to mitigate those.
Thank you.
It was my understanding in previous conversations that your raw material products will come in by truck or by rail, and your end product will go out strictly by truck. Is that correct?
Not completely, but let me tell you a little bit about what's going on. And the part of the reason that we're co-locating next to the Carmouche facility is one of our raw materials is actually going to be conveyed across to our manufacturing site, which we're very excited about. This enhances our principle of sustainability and frankly keeps trucks off the road carrying raw materials into the plant. And there will be some raw materials that will need to be brought in by truck, certainly cartons, those kind of things come to mind if you can imagine a cat litter box on the shelf, right? Other materials materials, the main ingredients, will also be brought in by rail as well. So we will do everything we can to minimize that inbound footprint. But I think your statement is correct. You'll have more trucks taking product out than bringing raw materials in. And that's part of our design, and our intent is to minimize that impact.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrison?
You stated that your startup plan would be about 100 employees, which
Yes.
is a modest, moderate size. Do you have intentions, if this works well, to expand this?
So our plants, in general, as economic conditions change, they do grow, and we don't know. I really can't answer your question. I would expect over time with a new site that there could be some growth. There's not a plan for dramatic growth at this time at the plant. There could be plans for some growth. I'm not sure if I'm answering your questions. I can't be too precise. I could probably put some bands on it and tell you, but this is not going to be like some of our larger sites in the U.S. It could grow by some percent.
Well, a lot of industries, when they start, have projections for future growth.
Mm-hmm.
So they have an A, B, C, and D growth plan. You don't have anything like that at this time?
Oh, for sure we do, but we're a publicly traded company, and so our cat litter business is one of the ones we're most proud of, and frankly, it's one that's seen a lot of press in our own analysts and other conversations, so I don't want to talk specifically about our cat litter business. We're building a plant because it's growing, for sure, but we would not expect that to be dramatic growth. I'm struggling with the percent because we're a publicly traded company. I really can't give you a percent at this point. If that,
There's a possibility there will be a more rapid growth or a very moderate growth.
yeah, so to use your words, I would describe it as moderate. If you said rapid or moderate growth, I would describe it as moderate. Again, if that helps you. And certainly, I think we've got some boundaries in the planning documents that we put in place. Yeah, if you can go ahead.
We also understand that anything that would come in as future growth would require a new application because of the limits that are being placed on this, so we understand that. And one other thing I'll mention, the employees would be working around the clock. They wouldn't all be showing up at the same time or leaving at the same time, so you're probably looking at 30 or 40 employees at the most showing up at one time.
Thank you, Tim. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, this is a discussion item. This is usually where I say, let's discuss. So, any thoughts? Mr. Bone?
I'll just start us off, and, Candace mentioned that at the comp plan committee, we generally were supportive of the word should in the document. And I think in looking at this again and just reading through things, the reason for that is because should is the term we use, throughout the document. So to me, it's a matter of being kind of consistent in terms of the terminology throughout the document, not just in the Northeast Land Use Plan, but throughout. And also, I think that generally speaking, this language, it articulates, it outlines, the concerns and the objectives, what we're looking for, in this area and what we're going to expect when we see, a land use application come forward. So I feel comfortable, frankly, that whether it's shall or should, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, it ultimately is a policy document, so if it says shall, it's ultimately going to depend on, what the modeling shows and all of the other things in terms of what we end up doing. So if I were to weigh the two, recognizing it's a policy document and therefore general in nature and not a regulatory document where shall means a lot more, I tend to prefer should personally. So as this moves forward, that's that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Anyone else?
I guess, I was thinking about that, and I kind of felt like Chris did starting out, but things go through my mind that we've been dealing with in the county for a long time, and one example is 37. Should we build 37 around the east side of town, or shall we? Yeah, we should, but it hadn't done any good for the last 30 years.
Mr. Thomas?
I agree with Mr. Moen. This is a planning document, it's not a contract. It's a planning document to give the sense of what the area use is, what the land use designation is, and also the coordination that needs to be done. And when you come right down to it, I also don't think that should or shall makes any difference in this context, because whatever PennDOT requires, they're going to have to do. Whether we put shall, if, maybe, it doesn't matter what we say. What PennDOT says, you have to build this, you've got to widen the road, you've got to put, or when VDOT, PennDOT, I'm sorry, wrong state. Whatever VDOT says, they're going to have to do. And, what we put in a document is really meaningless. This is the sense that, yes, we want them to admit that they're going to be financially responsible for it. PennDOT doesn't have any money to give them to do it anyhow, so really, even if they don't think they're going to be financially responsible for it, they are, because we don't have any money. So, I don't think it really makes any difference.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? I want to ask for just a clarity before I ask for where everybody stands on this. Candace, for one more time, what we're really looking for here is how we're going to move this onto the board. They'll say either shall or should, so we're going to eliminate one of them tonight. Is that my understanding? Or are we going to let it still go through just as it's worded now and let the powers that be?
We're seeking input of what the planning commission's preference is, and then that preference will go to the board, and then the board will make the determination of what they send forward to public hearing, should or shall.
All right. So, anyone else got any comments to this effect? You're good? Mr. Klein, anyone else? You do?
I have a letter I'd like to read. I've studied, read, heard a lot about this comprehensive plan over the last year. I've spoke to citizens in my district, neighbors. I feel the change in the land use to industrial next to Brucetown Town Center is not in the best interest of the community. There is land in the area that is sitting vacant, already zoned and planned for industrial. Until this application, the idea of expanding the industrial uses in the east of the quarry was unheard of. Additional truck traffic, noise, lights will concur to close Brucetown, will burden the community. I recommend the application be sent to the Board of Supervisors with the recommendation that it die in discussion and not move forward to public hearing.
Okay. That being said.
Is that a motion?
No, we don't have a motion here. There's no motion. It's just a discussion, but I'm going to make a statement that what we're looking for is, do we want to go before the board with the word shall or should? And so right now, I would interpret what you're saying, Mr. Klein, as you would like to say shall do this. So not to put words in your mouth, and I've got two that said should, two that shall. So any other commissioners that would have any thoughts on it, still speak freely, but this is where we're at, so.
Well, the meaning of shall is plan to, expect to, or might. And if you really want a really strong word, you'd use the word will. So consider it 3 words.
You had to throw a wrench into it.
Well, as I glance to my right, I always look over for some guidance over there. So I don't know if I want to go down that road tonight. So we got 2 words in front of us, shall and should. And so if there's no other discussions, what I'm do is that right now we're split, but what I'm also hearing, I'm not hearing enough deciding factors that this should not go to the board without the word, either word in there. So I want to start down probably with Mr. Moen, and we're going to probably send it to the board with what I believe we have heard tonight, unless someone tells me some other direction here, is that we're going to send it to the board with the word should do this, and then this will go through the agencies that it needs to go through to make this work. So is that your intent, Mr. Moen?
That's my intent.
Okay, Ms. Dawson?
Yes.
Yes, I think that's what we should do.
Okay.
Well done, Charlie.
I'm supposed to follow that.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
I would have to say no at this point.
All right, good.
I'll say yes.
All right,
Yes.
Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Yes, I agree with should.
That's a question.
Mr. Aaron?
Yes.
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 I'm going to go with should. I don't know which that's a yes or no.
Chair votes yes. This will go to the Board of Supervisors. I believe it's on the 13th of March with that wording, with that direction. Okay?
I'm not going to report that to anything.
Are there additional comments on the actual comprehensive plan amendment or
And I'm glad you brought that up because that's where we need, I didn't hear any more comments, so I guess it goes through as we've discussed, because we got hung up on the word shall and should instead of what was actually on here was the comprehensive plan amendment for that thing. So by that, it's going on to them with a favorable, to send it on to them, that's where we're at.
just wanted to make sure there weren't any more comments about the actual text going forward?
No, you didn't, no one was said, so no one's going to be heard. So
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next item is also an information discussion item.
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself from this item.
Thank you, Mr. Marston. The next item is CPPA number 01-19, Blackburn Property Workforce Housing, Urban Development Area, UDA expansion and land use designation. This is a request for the urban development area expansion and land use designation change to allow for the development of workforce housing that would provide affordable housing opportunities for residents of the community located within a reasonable proximity of workplaces in the community.
Yes.
This amendment proposed to add 71.849 acres to the urban development area. This amendment also seeks to designate 71 acres for workforce housing. This property is located on the east side of Apple Valley Road and is bordered along the western property line by Route 37 West. This property is already within the limits of the sewer water service area and is split between RA rural areas and M1 light industrial, and is identified by property identification number 63-A-801 in the Back Creek Mass Jail District. Ms. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The Board of Supervisors' December 12th meeting, the board directed staff to undertake a study of the subject property for an urban development area, UDA expansion request, as well as a land use designation for workforce housing. Now, the site's 71 acres located along Apple Valley Road. It's currently within the sewer water service area and is currently zoned, it's a split zone property, zoned RA, rural areas, and M1 light industrial. Comprehensive plan currently designates the property for industrial land uses. The applicant is requesting the urban development area expansion to allow for the development of workforce housing that would provide affordable housing opportunities for residents of the community located within a reasonable proximity to workplaces in the community. If I can direct you to the screen on your left, the subject property is outlined in blue. You have Route 37 running along the back of the property, Apple Valley Road along the frontage, and it does have some frontage on Middle Road. Now, this map shows the current zoning of the property. As you can see, the split zoned, the area with no color is zoned RA, rural areas, and that blue is zoned M1. It was rezoned a couple years ago as part of the Blackburn rezoning, which is where you see the Trex buildings currently. And this is the current comprehensive plan designation. As you can see, the entire property is in blue, therefore planned for future industrial. And this is the proposed change to the comprehensive plan. Now, the urban development area is currently within the limits of these residential units. It is proposed to take that urban development area, run it up the existing residential located across Apple Valley Road and then around the property, and then designate it as workforce housing. The Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee discussed this at their February meeting. While the CPPC did recognize that workforce housing was needed within the county, they expressed concern about the area this was proposed for. The CPPC did not support the loss of planned industrial and recommended denial of the request. So with that, we are seeking comments from the Planning Commission to forward to the Board of Supervisors. I would be glad to answer questions, and Mr. Evan White is here on behalf of the application.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Thomas?
Does the county have a definition of workforce housing?
We've outlined it within the comprehensive plan text that states that it's housing meant for persons making 60% or less of the median household income. So that's in the comprehensive plan text.
Okay, we put that in the definition section also?
We don't have definitions in the comprehensive plan, so it's just actually inlaid in the text.
Once we designate this as workforce housing, if that should happen, we've kind of tried this a lot of times. And being against affordable housing is like being against motherhood and apple pie. But being able to get to workforce housing or affordable housing or low-income housing, however it's evolved the name over the years, has eluded most jurisdictions. It starts out as affordable housing, and then after the first gyration goes through, the rents go up, and it goes up to commercial available rents. So what is the ability, or what is the enforcement tools that would be able to control the rent in these locations? How many existing properties do we have that are already rezoned that could be used for this type of a workforce housing? Since this is going to be a low-income or a affordable housing area, who's going to provide all the money to improve the transportation network there, because it's not anywhere near capable of handling 2,000 trips a day that will be generated from this location. We talk about workforce housing being in a strategic area that's located close to the employment centers and shopping centers. This really isn't located next to either, so there's going to be a lot of transportation needs. Who's going to control the rent in the future after the first developer sells the property off to another financial group? How do we control those things? That's what has always frustrated us in the past and killed these type of proposals. So where do we go on that? I mean, this sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to build houses that we guarantee are less than $50 a square foot for construction, so they can be rented out at $700 a month. I mean, a lot of questions that there's no answers to.
Right. With the county, unfortunately, the next step would be a rezoning. And at that point, in order to solidify the workforce housing, it would have to be proffered. And then from there, obviously, they would get their funding, but then it would be the county looking over their shoulder almost for the next however many years to ensure that they're still keeping what their proffers. And the same goes for transportation improvements. All that would have to be worked out during the rezoning, and the expectations that they're still mitigating their impacts on the county.
Can we put a proffer, if we would get to that point, are we able to put a proffer in there that the developer would commit that he would never raise or wouldn't raise the rent for 5 years over $700 a month for these units? I don't think we can. So where's our enforcement ability? We start off with great intentions, but we failed for the last 15 years. And then being this, I think, is an extremely poor location for it, how many empty rezoned lots do we have in the county that would be a better location for this? I mean, we hit probably a couple thousand.
Right.
So it's not like we don't have places to put it that are probably a whole lot better than this location.
Mr. Oates?
Well, I agree with Roger. I think he backed right into CPP's recommendation that that's a great idea, a bad location, and we're losing some limited industrial ground that we have in the county that's really hard to get and plan for additional housing.
Mr. Morrison?
I think the developer has laid out that this is an awkward piece of land for commercial use. And again, I very much like the idea of having affordable housing in Frederick County. But we're dropping this right in the middle of some very high-end housing on 3 sides of this. And I'm sure that the existing homeowners aren't going to be real happy in 15 years from now having that next to their homes. So the idea is great. The use of the land is great, but however, the overall location really bothers me.
Anyone else? Comments? Questions, Ms. Perkins? I have to agree. I know we went through CPPC that the first item we have, we're adding M1 land, industrial land. This item here, we're taking it away, and we struggle with some other that come before the comp plan committee to get more M1 land. It's one of our big mantras, and then we're giving up M1 land here. And so have to say the same on that. So I don't really have a question other than it just seems like that's, we come down to this when somebody can't further develop what they want, then we go to this. But I think there is other locations, but it's not really just a comment at this point. So
And Mr. Wyatt also wanted to say a few words, so I'll go ahead and.
we may let him. Mr. Wyatt, would you like to say it? Any questions of Mr. Wyatt? Open forum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Evan Wyatt with Greenway. What I wanted to do, for those of you that were not members of the comp plan committee and weren't at that meeting, I wanted to kind of revisit where we were at that meeting. And of course, we put together the application, submitted the proposal. And when we got to the committee, that was really our first opportunity to kind of hear feedback on what we were proposing. And the comments that we heard, Mr. Moan, of course, gave an overview during the committee report. I did not hear anything that on the surface appeared to me to be an unreasonable comment. And of course, the real question is, and you all have covered this, is something that's planned for future industrial and giving that up and going to residential. And then also the comment about finding a location in the urban development area that was suitable. So what we wanted to try to do was to take that feedback and do some research and come to this body tonight with some additional information. You obviously heard the speakers that spoke in favor of the need for workforce housing, so I certainly don't plan to revisit that. Some of the more technical questions that Mr. Thomas asked about the financing, kind of, if you are interested, Avi would certainly be happy to address those. But where I started in my thinking process was at the comp plan meeting. And so the first thing I did was I looked at the Blackburn property as a whole. And you may recall there was a discussion about that a portion of this was rezoned. So the Blackburn property used to be basically this area right here. And when this was looked at, it was rezoned, and the developer decided purposefully only to rezone this portion and then to develop two buildings. This is about a 420,000 square foot building. This is about a 365. That size unit is definitely consistent with what we're seeing when people are coming in here to look for Frederick County, even upwards to 1 million square feet, but usually 350 to 500 is what we're hearing a lot of. So those are examples of that. So I spoke to the realtor that brokered the deal for the Blackburn property, and the obvious question was, because the land was priced very reasonably, why didn't the developer choose to take the entirety of the property and develop it? And the answer was because of the wetlands impacts and the constraints it put on the ability to develop the property. And that same developer, you may recall, moved directly from doing this project to another site about a mile away and rezoned it. So it's not like they ran out of gusto to develop. They obviously identified a problem in development. So the next thing I wanted to look at was I wanted to better understand why there was a problem. There's delineated wetlands that pretty much run a little bit on the properties that were developed, but the majority are on this remaining parcel. And so trying to look at a footprint and truck loading and parking, the problem you have with the site from an industrial development perspective of that magnitude is you get into where you're exceeding an acre of wetlands disturbance, which puts you into a very significant permitting issue with additional cost, but more importantly, timeline to get approval. And industrial developers, generally, if they buy land and they submit a site plan, they don't want to dicker around for a year to determine if they're going to get a wetlands permit issued by Army Corps and by the EPA. So that's kind of a look as to what is the constraint of the property. And so really what you're looking at is a usable area of the property for development purposes that's in this area. So could it develop with industrial use? Certainly. But it's very diminished as opposed to what I think the industrial developers are looking for. And obviously, I think that had a lot to go and to say with why the developer of the parcels to the south did not just pick up the whole piece and do the remaining top portion. So when you look at a residential project, and this is the single-family workforce housing concept that we've been talking about, you have the ability to work in and around the wetlands pockets so you don't have the disturbance, and it makes a more efficient use of being able to utilize the majority of the land for the property. So with a community like this, maybe a couple quick points. The community itself is purchased, it is developed, it is owned, and it is rented by a single entity. They're responsible for bringing the units in, for establishing the units. They're responsible for building the streets, maintaining the streets, because these would be private streets, maintaining the open space, providing for community facilities and community centers, and maintaining those, as well as maintaining the units interior and exterior. So that's kind of a look at how you can make use of the property with that. Now, the other comment that was made was the urban development area and the ability to find a place for workforce housing. So when we looked at this using the county's GIS data, this is where the Blackburn property is, which is about 70 acres. We looked at comparable sites, and you'll see that one is red up here and one is red down here. Both of those are currently on the market for sale. Neither one of them are conducive to it. And then we also looked at properties that might work that were in that same threshold of acreage, and none of those really work either because they are currently used for other purposes, or the cost to bring infrastructure, utilities, and whatnot to get them to a developed state puts them in a price point where they're more market rate type properties than they are workforce housing. So we wanted to just take that look, because once again, the comments that were made at the comp plan committee were valid comments, and they are reasonable, and you would think, you know, if this is planned for future industrial, why not? And it's a good question, but I think the answer is because of the constraints of the property, which is why the previous developer did not take that opportunity. The one thing I'll say about what I understand about workforce housing is because it is a cap on what you can rent properties for, that means there's also a cap on how much money you can spend on developing. So if you're doing infrastructure and other things, you really have to have a site where utilities are available, which is the case here. You have to have the ability to buy land at a reasonable cost, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because this is not a conventional quarter-acre residential project like we've seen quite a bit of in Frederick County. So I just wanted to share that information with you to help you with your thinking process. Once again, Mr. Thomas, Avi is happy to give you more specifics about for lack of a better term, the cost control, if you're interested, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thomas?
You say you looked through the urban development area for 70-acre sites. What about looking for 5 or 6, 10 or 15-acre sites?
Okay. He can speak to that too, but it's, well, actually, I'll just let you answer that question.
So part of, and Evan hit the nail on the head, we've got a constrained budget in order to deliver high-quality housing at the rents that people can actually afford to pay. So one thing you look at is land price per unit. This is check the mark. If you look, if we actually have, I think we provided in the data we gave you, we analyzed what the land cost per unit would be in the other available sites, and it's double, triple, quadruple, as one example. The other key is scale. The financing programs that are used to develop these projects cost the same amount of legal fees, whether you're building 5 units or 500. So if you've got $500,000 in legal fees and you're putting on 5 units, can't afford it. you're putting in over 200 units, well, now you're amortizing in a way that makes sense. Also, property management, same thing. If you're got one property manager for 10 rental apartments, that's expensive. One property manager for 100 starts to make sense. If you're trying to do small lot, single-family homes like we are doing, and you do a 5-acre site, you maybe can put, God, we're getting 4 units an acre, 16 homes on it? It just doesn't work from a financing perspective. Hypothetically, if you found 30 of them clustered together, so you had a somewhat scattered site, maybe? But there's not a lot of, I mean, that's, now you're starting to talk about 30 different acquisitions, and fundamentally, you try and have projects like this be at least 100 units or more, preferably 150, 200 is even better. Like, the bigger the better from a spreading your fixed costs across more units. So that's why a 5-10 acre site, A, doesn't meet the demand that well, because you're only delivering 20 units when there's clearly demand for hundreds of this. But B, you can't finance it.
Thanks, sir.
Ask him a question.
Yes.
While you're up here, understand the land cost and all that. What about the transportation improvements that would be needed?
We are fully prepared to go through the proffer process like any other development would do. We have done an initial analysis through Evan on all of those impacts and estimated what that would be for our budgeting purposes. We could be wrong, but at least we do have numbers in our budget for that. One interesting thing I will admit, pleasantly surprised by, and we'll get to that when we get to the proffers and zoning. But if you look at what our planned land use is and the traffic impacts it has versus what the site is currently zoned for, we're actually a lower traffic impact than what the current zoning is. But that being said, when we get to the proffers, I know we'll have that conversation. We're prepared to have that conversation. Evan is a very good Sherpa to us going through this process. He's briefed us. He knows what we're getting into. So we get it.
Thank you.
In the event that this would go down, if you move into this place, you're only allowed to make so much money. Is that correct?
Not exactly. So there is income testing, but at the moment that you move in. If you hit the lottery 6 months later, God bless, you stay. When you eventually move out, and now, honestly, if I hit the lottery, I wouldn't be living in the house I am a year later, right? So odds are, if you have a dramatic increase in your income, while you don't have to leave, you're probably going to at some point. So when the unit turns over, I, as the owner, have to then replace you with a new income eligible person. So yes, there is an income test at the time that you move in, but it's a one-time thing. So and it's designed that way because you want people to be able to improve themselves, improve their family's quality of life without worrying about losing their home. If they want to stay in this home, they can stay in it for the rest of their life, regardless of income.
Thanks.
I guess to back that question up a little bit, and I don't know numbers like you do with this, but let's say somebody moves in there making $50,000. And I don't know what your cap is on what you can, how much you can make, but let's say it's 50. Is there anything to govern how much you can charge, whether it be $1,000 or $1,200 a month? I mean, does that change?
So yes.
I'm sure it can change if somebody makes a lot more than somebody else. I think, I don't know that.
So to answer your question, we're regulated, these are federal regulations.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, these are feds. So I'm living under the federal guidelines and federal requirements. Obviously, they peg it, as you heard the previous testimony, as a % of area median income. So the rent that I can charge here is a lot lower than the rent I'm charging in projects in DC, because the area median income is lower here than it is in DC. So you look at two things. They look at the developer, me, on what the rent I am charging. So regardless of your income going up, I can't raise your rent because they require me at the federal level to charge a rent that is affordable to someone in the original income range that could walk the door. Because theoretically, you could leave tomorrow and the next person walks in the door. If the rent's gone all the way up for you, well, then they can't afford it. So they look at me for charging the rent. They also look at me to making sure that I income tested you, that you qualified when you moved in. So you have this, you're right, there is, especially in a lot of older workforce housing projects where families have been there for 8 or 10 years, you have a lot of people living there that no longer income qualify. And now their rent stayed roughly where it was, so they're no longer house poor. Like you heard the testimony earlier, 24% of Frederick County is income constrained and spending more than the amount of money they should on their rent. So you have that. The other element of that, besides the rent levels, sorry, lost my train of thought. But there was a second question there. Another was.
Well, I'm thinking of something while you're talking. If somebody, let's do the 50 again.
Sure.
If somebody's making $50,000 a year and they go in at $1,200 is what they owe for the rent. And over a period of time that they lose their job and then they've got to go to a job making $28,000 or $30,000, do they have to move out? Because it's going to force them to probably, or do you adjust?
And I remembered the second thing I was going to say, so I'll do that and then come back to you. So I am allowed to raise the rent, but it's tied to the income, the area median income. So if the area median income goes up 1%, I can raise the rent 1%. Like cost of living, like the intent is it's always affordable to that same income band, but if the income is going up across the county over a 15-year period, so that same 60% of AMI is higher 15 years from now than it is today, I'll be able to charge a higher rent proportionally to that. Also, because the federal government recognizes that my operating expenses are going to go up over time. So some normal cost of living increases are anticipated and baked into the system. To answer your question specifically on what happens if someone loses their income.
We're part of it.
Are part of it. There's two things so the program itself does not protect you in that situation. It doesn't. Most responsible, smart, long-term thinking landlords work with you because it is hard to find a really good tenant, right? So when you find one, you want to keep them. So if they hit a rough patch and they come to you before you even notice anything, right? That's the thing. That's also a big thing. We tell people this all the time on all of our projects. If you hit a hiccup, please tell us, because we can work with you. If on the other hand, all of a sudden you just didn't pay your rent for 3 months and you don't talk to us, there's nothing we can do. So if they came to us and said, look, there's a temporary hiccup, we'll work with them. In the absolute worst case, if it stretches a while, they might be living in a 4-bedroom home and we might ask them to move to a 2-bedroom home. Absolute worst case. But the last thing you want to do is take someone who's been a good tenant and kick them out when it's clearly something that was not in their control.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we've got a good education on workforce housing. Got one more question, Mr. Morrison. Is it for that, Al?
This may be a premature question based on the process we're in.
Sure.
But the elephant in the room to me is building 200 homes, low income, probably a higher than average school-age population going to be coming out of these 200 homes. So how do we?
Well, I would, 3 answers. Well, no, I would argue that I would not even just argue, it's not low income, right? If you're talking about teachers, firefighters, police officers, nurses, if you want to call a nurse low income, you can, I wouldn't. So
well, I'm just saying these are more affordable versus low income.
Sure, it's workforce.
Right. We'll just call what we got in front of us workforce housing for right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
The answer very simply is if this gets past the comprehensive planning stage and this property is deemed to be acceptable to move forward with the project, our next step in the process would be to go through a formal rezoning. With the rezoning, of course, amongst other things, Frederick County Public Schools provides comments as to what they believe the projected school children impacts would be for a certain number of units. And then it's up to us, based on our proffers, to address the specifically attributable impacts for the project. If we don't meet that test, there's no obligation for this panel or the board to approve the rezoning.
Thank you. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
I just had one quick question, actually, for Avi, I think is probably the best person. quickly, what's the federal program that you all are going to?
Call it the low-income housing tax credit. So if people see these projects, they go low income, but the definition in the federal code is 60% of AMI.
Right, so it's a LIHTC
Yes.
project, so it's something you'd be working through VHDA?
Yes.
On that, okay.
And to answer, actually, there was a question earlier about how long will these stay affordable, because I actually, Mr. Thomas, I think you're the one that brought this up earlier. It's a pet peeve of mine. So I am born and raised Washington DC, now live in Loudoun County, but we have seen the same thing happen, especially with ADU ordinances in, Montgomery County and Loudoun and Fairfax. So the first wave moves in, they buy their ADU unit, and it's a workforce ADU unit, affordable dwelling unit. And they live there 10 years, and then the deed restriction comes off it, and now what they paid $400,000 for, they can sell for $800,000. So the next teacher that moves in, they can't afford the house. I can't stress enough, 2 points on that. VHDA financing slaps a 40-year deed restriction on it. Not 10, not 15, 40. We are more than willing to proffer permanent as part of the zoning thing. I have absolutely no plans, and my partners have no plans. This is what we do. This is what we are called to do because we know there's a need for it. And my kids have already walked this site, and they're 9 and 6. And I want them to be able to bring their kids to it and to see 50 years from now, the same teachers, firefighters, and police officers that lived there 50 years earlier still live there. Because there's clearly a need now. There will be even more of a need as time goes on, as my hometown creeps up on your county, coming out 66. It's only going to get worse. So I know there's a need, and I also recognize that by making this commitment to both our residents and our neighbors in the county, and over the long run, it benefits us. We know we'll be here next to each other, so if something comes up down the road we didn't see coming and we need help, we can reach out, and we'll be good residents of the community. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you.
Let me just ask you one question, and I don't know.
Remember, this is, what we're dealing with tonight is the urban development area expansion, not the minutia of how workforce housing works and how it's financed.
I'll keep it brief because it's
Okay.
not a,
Yeah. Not a public hearing, we're just here for a discussion.
in the event that this flies, and I know we've had some dealings with it in Frederick County, the way that some of the regulations were changed over the last year or so, and the proffers, I don't think are clear like they were before. It worries me that when it comes to the schools, the proffers they may not be what the county expected to see, and you may still be doing it legal. As far as, and with the 200 houses, it just bothers me that we're going to be faced with that soon.
Two responses. First, I recognize that technically we've gone off the field on the scope, but I think, but I also recognize that what we are asking for here is unique. No one in this room at the Board of Supervisors has seen something like this come through the door. And I think the more you guys understand the background of why, of how we got here and how it's financed and how it's done, helps you understand why we're asking for this here versus another site. So
Well, your passion is clearly evident, and we support, what we're tasked with tonight is whether this goes on in this particular location, in the urban development area, and the land use designation.
But to answer on the schools, we built in a school impact fee in our budget. It's there, based upon the analysis that Greenway has already done. But I guess the more fundamental point, there is a tension that is, you can't resolve it. On the one hand, desperate need for workforce housing, so folks that are working here can't afford to live here. But those folks, unless you're going to say we want workforce housing, childless workforce housing, only people working here without kids we want to live here, right? You're going to have kids moving into homes that are a workforce housing project because the people that are your nurses, teachers, and firefighters, yeah, they have kids. And that, I don't see any way of resolving that conflict. It's going to be there. There's going to be that underlying tension. What we could do is make sure that we budget for the impact fees and pay our way and build that into our budget, and we've done that. But as a philosophical thing, we're never going to be able to solve that one.
Well, you didn't cause this problem. Virginia changed that law a couple of years ago, and it's been a conflict in Frederick County somewhat, and that's not your fault. I'm just bringing it up.
Thanks, sir. All right, Mr. Oates.
Yeah, I do not have a question, but I will just say again, I'm baffled by the supervisor pushing this forward, that we're taking one spot, one of our limited spots that is a positive economic generator for industrial uses, and looking at it for residential housing. It is unique in that we've never heard workforce housing before, but we have seen this scenario before, like Stoughton Bridge, where we lost an entire industrial area, now we have 22 houses going in there.
2,200.
We're just setting ourselves up to repeat history, in my opinion.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, since this is a discussion.
Yes, but it is a discussion.
I totally agree with Mr. Oates. I would love to have this somewhere in the county, but this is not the right location, and it shouldn't be on an area that's industrial zoned. It's just transportation problems there, noise problems with the existing zoning there. It's the water problems on the site. I mean, I've driven by that site and seen half of it underwater. It's a bad site. It probably won't be developed as an industrial site either, but I don't think you could get that many houses in there. So it's not the right location.
Okay, any other discussions? Thank you, sir. To my left? Yes, sir.
When we get into the rezoning discussion, how the proffer legislation really did impact counties in Virginia. To point out that the most recent legislative session, which just ended, addressed some changes to the proffer legislation, which, while they don't return it back to how it was prior to the 2016 legislation, it provides a greater opportunity for localities to work on proffers with applicants for residential development. So there'll be some, if you will, some guidance that comes out with regards to the legislative changes on proffers. It doesn't get us all the way back to how it was in the past, but it is not as bad as the 2016 legislation, which really hamstrung localities in addition to residential developers. So, of course, that's part of the future process, the rezoning, but I wanted to make that point of clarification.
Thanks, sir. Well, what we got before us is, we've had a discussion, we've got the information. We'll go to the board. Candace, you're looking for some direction, whether we're favorable or not, to move this on to the board. And what we're looking at is strictly what it is, the comp plan amendment, and it's for workforce housing for urban development area expansion, UDA, and the land use designation change. And that change would be to, as it's been clearly stated, we're taking away M1 land, and it's got some rural on it, and make it all residential. So I'll start with Mr. Oates, and I'm just going to, if you're in favor of moving this forward as we got it before us tonight, or?
Oates or Unger?
I mean, Unger, I'm sorry. Gosh, I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
I'm taking insult to that.
Toying with this idea when I first heard it, I hated it. I didn't like what was going on there. It's been explained to me that developers didn't buy it because of the problem it's got. Do I like it? No, but I don't know if you can't use it for industrial. I mean, it's going to sit there for, in a hayfield or whatever they're going to use for it. I've got very mixed feelings about it. I guess my initial thought is no, but I'm not against it if that's all it can be used for either. I don't know how to answer your question.
It's clearly a definite maybe then?
I don't know if you can use that. I'm going to say no, but I understand the fact.
All right. Mr. Ambrosi?
Yes.
Send it on as written, okay?
Yes, I think we should send it on.
No. No. Mr. Klein?
No.
No. Mr. Oates? No.
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 Morrison? Triplet?
Triplet, no. No.
No. Mr. Moan?
I'm not necessarily convinced that anything has changed since the comp plan committee discussion, although I appreciate the information that's been shared, so I'd stick with no.
Okay. It's a no, and chair's no, so it'll go to the Board of Supervisors on April 10th with a least than favorable. So And if I hope that helps you some, there's our results. Thank you.
Is there any chance of another grocery store buying the shop and save?
We're at the next spot on our agenda is other. Mike, did you have anything under our other tonight? I thought you had something.
Is on offer again, and we have somebody who's going to participate in this next session. If there is an interest out there for people to participate again, while this current session may be filling up, and it actually may be full already, they're starting a second one in June. So again, that Planning Commission training program is back up and running through Virginia Commonwealth University and available to any planning commissioners who may want to attend.
Okay.
We would encourage that.
Good to hear. Mr. Oates.
Yeah, I've seen something pretty unique tonight. Our discussion items that historically have just been between staff and us, and we offer our comments for the board and move on, is kind of morphed into a public hearing where the applicants are given a chance to speak and the public isn't. And I've kind of got a problem with that. Either we've redefining how we're going to handle discussion items or something, but this is, to me, unfair to the public to give the applicants this much time to speak, but yet the public can only speak during the comment session before they even hear this. I think we need to revert back to the way it was. If it's a public hearing, it's a public hearing. If it's a discussion, it's strictly between us and staff, and we move on.
Okay. Point taken. We'll take that up with staff, and we'll discuss that. So.
I agree with Gary. It seemed very odd today that it went down the way it did. Usually when somebody talks about something and the applicant has a way to come back and try to correct it or explain to them why they're doing something,
Yeah, we don't even know if these are going to be real projects, so we
Nope,
got
that's
pretty
just-
deep in the weeds tonight over something. We don't know what the board of supervisors are even going to do.
Absolutely.
Comments well taken. Staff heard those, so I'm sure we'll have some discussions, unless they want to comment to the fact, but I think maybe we'll talk about those.
If these move forward at public hearings at the appropriate time.
Okay. We'll take it. Thank you for your comments. Our next meeting, do we have a next meeting scheduled, Mr.
At
Rudd?
this point, we don't have any items. We will do for the April meeting, but we don't have any for the second meeting in March at this time.
So it will probably be canceled then?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you need a motion to cancel it, or
20th.
move that we cancel our next meeting in March?
Second, all those in favor of canceling our second meeting in March, vote aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you.
For adjournment.
Second, all those in favor of adjournment? Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned.